Why did the UK and the US become so different religiously? Those who left on the Mayflower and its fellows were religious extremist Puritans, not your run-of-the-mill Protestants. Those attitudes thrived in small communities, fighting for physical survival on a vast continent with what they felt to be hostile native populations. Where the enemy is clear and external, the group tends to unite against it and purge those who do not join in. Even today, the Bible Belt areas have very low population density, small towns and big empty areas, with long distances between communities. Farther than you can walk in a day or two, farther than you would casually drive to get to another town like the one you left, so those inherited attitudes passed down the generations largely unchallenged. I thought the Mayflower Pilgrims were leaving to escape the Church of England. It wasn't conservative crazy enough, not Catholics. The Church of England was dominant in England by 1620. The US was initially settled in large part by a bunch of people who were kicked out or left Europe because they hated fun. And that fact has been fucking them over in unfun ways ever since. It's interesting that the UK operates as a secular state when it's pretty much not. The head of state is also the head of the Church of England. And the US is technically secular as far as I'm aware, but as OP mentioned, there's lots of religious elements inserted into it. A comparison a teacher gave us years was that in the US, no president would ever be elected if they said they weren't religious. In the UK, any aspiring prime minister would do well to have some knowledge of football, soccer, and a favorite team to mention when asked. No hate OP, but you seem to have an incorrect understanding of history. England, later Britain, had not been Catholic for decades. By the time it started properly colonizing the Americas, it was itself Protestant, specifically its own branch Anglicanism for England. Scotland followed Presbyterianism. It wasn't a case of Protestants wanting to escape Catholicism, it was a case of them wanting to escape other Protestants. Specifically, many of the settlers, such as those on the Mayflower, were Puritans, who were upset at the Church of England not having reformed enough. These were the people who at their extreme, such as Oliver Cromwell, considered Christmas, Easter, and any other festivities to be sinful. The same people who would name their children stuff like Jesus Christ came into this world to save, fear God, and fight the good fight of faith. So practically speaking, the US was founded by the people. Even highly religious early modern England considered to be extremely religious. McCarthyism had a part to play in American hyper-religiosity, as the realization of the bitter rivalry between capitalist America and communist USSR, Americans needed to become more polar opposite of their communist contemporaries. So, as communism is an atheist state, America needed to become more religious. It was only during this era that God started to be mentioned on American currency and the Pledge of Allegiance. Because the UK didn't have this commie purge behavior to anywhere near the same extent, we didn't have quite the same impact. Common misconception. The Pilgrims left the UK for religious reasons. Sure enough. They left because the Anglican Church was too liberal for their taste, which is all you need to know to explain religion in the US. Tony Blair was more worried about how the Labour Party would react to him being Catholic, seeing their standpoint on abortion. Plenty of UK prime ministers were religious, just not Catholic. Like some other people said, the Cold War caused a big revival in religious sentiment in the US. They wanted to contrast themselves with the supposedly godless atheist communists, so they embraced religion fully. The English kicked out the Pilgrims for being too much. The Dutch also kicked them out, and the people who came after weren't going from the same groups or for the same reasons. Different groups, different place, different dynamics. The English wanted to escape Catholicism, so the Protestants went to America is an incredible statement. Whoever told you that is not to be trusted on matters of history, or probably anything else. Many of the Puritans, a never fully defined group of fundamentalist Protestants, left because they believed the Reformation hadn't gone far enough, because there were still some structural similarities between the Reformed Church and the Catholic, and some of their deeply held cultural beliefs were not being tolerated. The beliefs in question were that Catholics should be driven into the sea and women were all evil whores. After about 1783, the two countries have gone their own ways in many respects, and attitudes to religion is one of them. The religious histories of all countries involved are huge topics of research, and comparing them is its own topic, so you won't get a great answer here. I will say that up to the 20th century almost everyone was some kind of Christian. I will point out what is, perhaps, one part of the puzzle, the godless commis. Religion was a key pillar of propaganda in the Cold War, and I suspect America got more of that than the UK. If it turns out that losing the empire has caused Brits to stop believing in God, I will wet myself laughing. You wouldn't hear God bless the UK. It would make us feel uncomfortable. Your national anthem is named God Save the King. So there's a very common misconception when it comes to America, and the principles it was founded upon. One of the biggest misconceptions is that America was founded on the idea of freedom from religion, and this simply isn't true. The original settlers supported the idea that you should be free to practice your religion, and not that you should be free to not to practice religion. Atheism has always been extremely taboo in the States and continues to be today. We've never had an openly atheist president, and honestly probably won't any time in the foreseeable future. People tend to look at atheists with suspicion in the US. The English wanted to escape Catholicism. That's not how Maryland tells the story. The UK didn't send their best and brightest. England sent all the religious nut jobs over to the US. Australia got the criminals. That's how I explain the religions in the US to folks in the UK. Our national anthem is God Save the King, although I don't imagine everyone means it. I worship the King. American settlers weren't just Protestants that didn't want Catholic authority, they were extremist Puritans. England was a more moderate Protestant nation at the time, and the Puritans hated that. So some of them fucked off to America where they could build a shitty, overbearing cult in peace. You think the American founding was Protestants escaping a Catholic England? You know America was founded after Cromwell and after the Jacobites were crushed when England was firmly Protestant nation that oppressed Catholics, right? Regardless, the answer to your question is Puritans and the Great Awakenings.